Hello, I'm Stephen Olson, and welcome to Spirit Basics, the show for everyone from the beginner to the avid connoisseur of fine spirits.
And I'm Jennifer Allan. Today's episode, we're going to look at the world of Grappa. Now, Steve, Grappa is basically a brandy-like spirit, isn't it?
It is indeed. Like other brandies made from grapes and or fruits, okay? Now, Grappa specifically describes what we call pomace brandies, a category of brandy, and pomace means that we're making it from the leftovers of the winemaking process. Probably not a very nice way to say that. Mar and Grappa, Mar being the French version of this, the best ones from Burgundy and Champagne usually, but from all over the country. Mar and Grappa are both made from distillates of the grapes and sometimes the lees, the skins, after we make wine. Okay? So basically there are several theories about where it came from. It probably dates back to about the 1500s. Could have been Piedmont, could have been Friuli, but I definitely believe that it was Italian. And today there are some oak-aged products, which we'll talk about a little bit later on, but the bottom line is today, Italian Grappa is a designer spirit.
Does Grappa have the same rich history as cognac does?
Well, just as long, maybe not quite as elegant, in that this was originally considered a peasant drink, if you will. Think about people working in the fields, doing the harvest, making the wine. When the wine was actually made, it was sold to people who had money, not the workers. They didn't have the money to buy it. So they would take the leftovers and then try to redistill it to get more alcohol out of it to survive. Literally to stay warm when they went out on a cold morning into the fields. Maybe a little in their coffee or with their breakfast even, or perhaps as a digestivo after dinner, or even to cook with, which was very, very common. Now in the 1960s and 1970s, the style of Grappa began to evolve and change, and of course with it the image of Grappa changed as well. Probably as a result of the explosion of Italian cuisine in the North American continent at that time. But the key is that it is no longer a drink only of the common man. Today it's a popular and premium spirit.
I'm understanding with a lot of these old spirits that there's a lot of rules and regulations that govern them. Is it the same for Grappa?
Absolutely. Italian Grappa is very strictly controlled. The distillation process, whether it's pot or continuous distillation, and it can be either, although the best are usually in pots. The aging classifications that they've implemented not that long ago, similar to some of the other spirits we've talked about. Single varietals of grapes, flavored Grappas. The idea of leaving a little grape juice in your pomace so that it has more flavor. All of these things that have evolved, we'll talk about a little later on.
Well, for his own unique look at the history of Grappa, we turn now to our master mixologist, Dale Degroff.
Grappa, poor man's brandy made in Italy. Grappa is like rum, made from the byproduct of the manufacture of another product altogether. Rum was made from molasses, which was the residue left over from sugar manufacture, an almost accidental product. Grappa was made by the winery workers from the mash left over after they pulled the juice out of the grape, the skins, the stems, whatever happened to be left over. And actually could prove to be dangerous because any alcohol that's distilled from cellulose like wood or those skins can be poisonous at times, and it had to be removed. But it was definitely a poor man's brandy. If you were wealthy enough, of course you bought real brandy or cognac. But these fellas made their own. It was a peasant thing. And we here on this side of the Atlantic have a charming sort of history of taking peasant food and peasant drink and putting it on a pedestal like the great dishes of southern Italy, the pastas and the vegetable sauces and the tomato sauces that are so cheap to make and that were the food of the peasants. Now we put them on a pedestal, charge $30 for them in our fine dining Italian restaurants. Which brings us to the fine dining Italian restaurants of the 50s, 60s, and 70s when Grappa started to change, at least on this side of the Atlantic, when companies like Nonino, a very famous Grappa producer, took the Grappa and put it in beautiful crystal hand-blown bottles and charged $30 a shot for it. They started to introduce higher-end Grappas, Grappas made from individual grape varieties, like Grappa Brunello. One of my favorite kinds of Grappa, and one of the Grappas that we drank in my family, was called Grappa Ruta. And actually we would make our own Grappa Ruta in a sense. We would buy commercial Grappa, and then we have a plant that my grandmother grew in the backyard called a Ruta plant. It was almost like a succulent. We also made tea from it. We put the Ruta in the Grappa, as a medicinal kind of addition. And ruta, according to my grandmother, was good for rashes. It was good for upset stomachs. We made tea with it. We put it in isopropyl alcohol to put on our bee stings and on our poison ivy. But we also put it in grappa. And there's an Italian grappa producer named Nardini, also puts ruta in their grappa. It's a succulent-looking green plant that seems to definitely have some kind of soothing properties to it, one of those folk cures, if you will. But grappa today is at the very high end in our fancy restaurants, up there on the shelf with the ports, the sauternes, the cognacs. And I think there's a lot of Italians that are sort of laughing under their breath at what we've made of their poor man's brandy, grappa.
Up next, we'll take a closer look at how grappa is made.
And our spirit insiders, Morgen and Scott, see what they can find out about grappa. All this and more coming up when Spirit Basics returns. Welcome back to Spirit Basics. It's time now to take a look at how grappa is made.
Well, as I said before, basically we are distilling the leftovers of the winemaking process, and that we call pomace, and those are the skins and the pulp of the grapes. Now, because it was fermented into wine, there's usually some alcohol in there too. Remember, we need an alcoholic beverage to be able to distill it. We have to start with fermentable sugars. So, generally speaking, grappa is made in a pot still, although we do see some of the larger production made in continuous stills. The pot stills will leave more of the fruit flavors, the grape flavors in the product.
Now that's traditionally how it was done, but you said in the 70s that all changed. What happened?
Well, there are still traditional grappas, but some of the producers started changing. One in particular, Nonino, which is an all-woman operation, a mother and her daughters, started to use a little bit of wine in their distillation with the grape skins, and that has spread. A lot of people doing that these days. They also started in the late 60s to use individual growers. As compared to buying grapes from the entire region, they'd pick one grower and make a grappa from their grapes. And of course, the natural evolution from that in the early 70s then was to make a single grape varietal we call a monovitigno, which is something that many producers started doing. So a grappa di Moscato, a grappa di Sangiovese, and so forth. And then recently there's been a new trend towards aquavita.
Water of life.
Exactly right. The water of life. Now, this is a trend towards using whole grapes. So the juice of the wine, like a traditional barrel. We call that uwe, which is from the Friulian dialect, and it actually means grape. Again, some grappas are aged in oak, some spend time in barrels. There are very specific aging requirements. These are just some of the trends that have changed grappa for the better. But for more on that, we're going to turn now to our spirit guide.
Okay, so everybody says grappa is like this poor man's brandy. It's this throwaway stuff, and I really don't think that that's fair to grappa, but we have to understand that grappa has changed a lot in the last decade or two. In fact, one of my favorite books, Burton Anderson's Vino, in 1970, comes out with this book. It's a fantastic book. It still applies today, even though it's obviously very old, but it has a picture of grappa making. And in it, you see a guy in a tractor, and the tractor is scooping up pomace, or these empty grape skins and seeds, and dumping them into a silo. Because the methodology was, I'll come back in like a couple of months and say, hey, Luigi, you remember to make it a grappa? No, you make it a grappa, you know. And you'd add some water to it, and then you'd distill that. And it was pretty nasty stuff because it had grown all sorts of special things during its time in the silo. Well, the modern world is totally different. One, you can't add water, it's illegal to do so. And two, to quote Angelo Gaia, who says, the way to make grappa more approachable to him and to his friends and the distillers he admires is to get the pomace to the distillery within 3 to 6 hours of pulling it from the tank. That time is so critical in order to make a cleaner, milder grappa. In fact, when you're making a great grappa, you would never press those grape skins out completely dry. You would leave some juice in there, because that's also going to make a cleaner, fruitier, more powerful, but I think more elegant grappa.
Now that we've taken a brief look at the history, the origins, and the process of making grappa, time for an inside look.
Our spirit insiders, Morgen and Scott, hit the road to see what they could find out about grappa.
Thanks, Stephen and Jennifer. I'm here at Willow Park Wines and Spirits with wine expert Peggy Perry to learn a little bit about this grappa. Now, Peggy, just off the top, we have grappa in 2 different glasses on the table. Why is that?
Well, different crystal companies make a different glass, and we have the Spiegelau Grappa glass, which has a little bit of a bulb, and often Grappa glasses do have a nice bulb. And then we have the Riedel glass, which is a little bit straight up and down. You see the lip of the glass? That affects where it hits you on the palate, and so that definitely affects how it tastes.
Now with Grappa, I find it tough to even find somewhere that has Grappa. Why is it not such a popular drink as it is in Italy?
Well, it's an acquired taste, shall we say. It's very much a drink that's associated with the Italian community. And so in cities that have a large Italian population, you're going to see more Grappa. We have very, very fine Grappas available in the market. You can see the darker Grappas. They've been aged in wooden barrels. That lends them not only color, but it softens the Grappas, makes them much more aggressive on the palate. They have a nice, more cognac-like finish. I find these Nonimo Grappas, this one's made with Merlot, this is made with Chardonnay. So that's kind of interesting. So they have the flavor of the grape that they're made with, and they're a little bit softer. You know, they're not quite as dry and perhaps as heated as some of the other Grappas. Sassicaia is one of my favorites. It's quite mellow, and it's even relative to some of the other less expensive Grappas, has a hint of sweetness on the finish, and that helps soften the overall effect.
Well, I think, you said it's a little bit of an acquired taste, almost like a Scotch or cognac is. But I mean, just even from, sipping a nice Grappa here out of a nice glass, I mean, gives you a little bit of appreciation for the drink.
It does, but for the Italians, it's like, it's just another drink.
It's like half a coffee.
It's an everyday drink.
Great, thank you very much, Peggy. Steve, Jennifer, back to you guys.
One of these steps in the evolution from old world common man to new world premium spirit is the fabulous packaging in some of these new bottles that say, to me, made in Italy.
They are beautiful. Up next, we continue our look into the world of Grappa, how to drink it and how to use it in some of your favorite cocktails. That's when Spirit Basics returns.
Spirit Basics is brought to you in part by Willow Park Wines and Spirits.
Welcome back to Spirit Basics, the show for everyone who wants to learn more about the world's best cocktails. Right now, we're going to talk about the proper way to drink Grappa.
You've heard it before. Ooh, Grappa, rocket fuel. I can't drink that stuff. If you're not that familiar with Grappa, you may find it just a little bit aggressive. But what we're talking about there is the old way of distillation as compared to the new way. Old Grappas, and understand there have been great Grappas around forever, but old Grappas had a tendency, the old style, harsh, bitter, maybe a little bit hot, and some of those are still hanging around. But some of the great producers of today, I mentioned Nonino, Jacopo Poli is another great one. These are artisanal producers. These are handmade products. And the most important part of this is that the better grapes that you use, the better distillation that you do, it makes better Grappa. That's the bottom line. Now, this, for example, is a Grappa made from the best grapes from a small producer, Sassicaia, which is one of the greatest wines in Italy. Now, we always say that there are no rules or regulations when it comes to drinking your favorite spirits, and there are not. However, if you want to enjoy a Grappa for your first time, or one of these great Grappas, drink it just slightly cool. Put it in a glass like this so that you enjoy the aromatics of the grapes without getting the alcohol. You keep the nose far away from the alcohol, and keeping it cool will keep the alcohol down just a little bit too. It's beautiful stuff.
Well, for more ideas on how to enjoy Grappa, we're joined by our spirit advisor.
Grappa. I love Grappa, but I know Grappa's not for everybody. I understand. For a lot of people, Grappa is just a little too direct, a little too in your face. I certainly believe that these new modern Grappas are fantastic drinks, and some of them are actually, even these days, being aged in barrel, aged for 2-3 years, and you end up with something that's a lot closer to brandy than it is to the old style Grappa that a lot of people think of. But if you think of only that old style, think again. It's time to try something else, because the flavors in these new Grappas are very direct, Now, I will admit to you that almost all of them have a sort of black peppery shot right up front, maybe a touch of green pear, and it is a powerful drink, no question about it. It's after that 5 seconds of whoa, you know, that's what I'm really there for. That's when I feel like I can taste in the finish the actual flavor of the grape. I feel like I've almost plucked a Pinot Grigio grape off the vine, or a Merlot grape, or a Pinot Noir grape, whatever, a Sangiovese grape, and I'm biting right into that cold, crisp grape, and the flavors go on and on and on. That's what I'm there for. And that's why I serve it in a glass like this. I mean, I want to be able to smell that grape. I want to be able to taste just that. That's for me is what I'm looking for, because I'm fascinated by Grappa's ability to hold that flavor for seemingly 10, 20, 30 minutes. But for a lot of people, a shot of this in a coffee, a cafe corretto, that makes for a perfect afternoon.
Our master mixologist, Dale Degroff, joins us now for a lesson on how to make a cocktail with Grappa.
So I'm using Grappa in a cocktail. Grappa, the poor man's brandy. It's funny, my mother's Calabrese, and you know, her family, they had that sort of peasant food down south there. Not the sophisticated northern Italian cuisine, but the red sauces and the vegetable, and you cook with bones to get flavor. And we turned that into gourmet food, of course. The similar thing happened to this poor man's brandy, Grappa. Now we put it in crystal decanters, and we sell it for $25 a shot. The stuff's not even made from free-run grape juice. It's poor man's brandy. And very hard to mix, by the way. It's got a little smoky, similar, you know, to a mezcal, or smoky like scotch. It's really smoky. And because it's smoky, it's kind of hard to mix with. So I decided I would, instead of trying to bury the smokiness in the drink, I would try to augment the smokiness. So I'm going to make a drink called the Grappa Espresso Cocktail. Because Grappa and espresso is a nice drink anyway. A little espresso, a little Grappa, very nice. So we're going to use equal parts of Grappa and coffee liqueur. All right. And then I'm going to add cold espresso. Hey, it's an Italian drink. Let's make an Italian drink here. You know that espresso is something that touches an Italian's lips about 15 times a day at different intervals throughout the day. Let's get some ice in here and shake it up. And you know what I would normally do? I would take this glass and a little bit of sugar, and I would give a little sugar rim to this glass so that the bitter espresso, even though there's a little sweetness from the coffee liqueur, the bitter espresso is not going to bury the drink. Let's put a little sugar on the glass so that when your lips hit the glass, you got a little sugar frosting on there to make it better. Here we go. Shake it up. A little more. So you make your espresso ahead of time, you chill it down, and you know something, when you shake espresso, you get the la crema. You know the crema that's supposed to be on top of espresso, you get a little crema on there on top of the drink. And you have the Grappa Espresso cocktail. Two great Italian traditions, the daily espresso and the poor man's brandy Grappa, together in one drink. Let's give it a little taste. Oh yeah, that's lovely. Steve, Jennifer, back to you. I got the best job.
Leave it to Dale to find a way to use a classic combination, Grappa and espresso, in a cocktail.
He's amazing.
He is.
After the break, we head to the kitchen with Grappa. That's when Spirit Basics returns. Welcome back to Spirit Basics. We're in the kitchen and we're joined by our Spirit chef, Chef Allan. Great to see you again.
Oh, I'm excited to be here today, Jennifer.
Now today we're talking about grappa, so you must be right in your element here.
My beloved adopted homeland, Italy, and grappa makes me think of just going back there all the time.
Now because grappa is made from grapes, can we use it the same way that we would use a wine in our recipes?
Well, to some extent, because you can deglaze a pan with grappa and you can add it to enhance flavor, but really we're talking about apples and oranges, even though we're talking about grape. The grappa is distilled and it's going to have more of an aftertaste, and wine is going to give you a really distinctive flavor as you add it, depending on what wine you use.
Now there's different kinds of grappa, even ones with different colors. How do you decide which one you're going to use in your recipe?
Well, just like wine, they're all going to have a unique taste because they come from a certain type of grape. So Chardonnay grappa will have a different nose and a different taste than, say, grappa from Moscato grapes. And so really the tough job is you actually got to stick your nose in them and smell them and taste them, and that's the best way to determine what flavor you're going to get out of them.
Now I love the smell of grappa, but I haven't yet acquired a taste for it. Am I going to notice the flavors in the dishes that I use it with?
No, what you're really going to get is you're not going to get the alcohol-y taste that some people don't like or need to acquire a taste for. But you're going to get the real floral flavors and the tastes that come out of the grappa, and it's actually a stronger grape taste depending on what grape's being used. So that's what you're going to get out of it.
All right, well, can you tell us about the dishes that we have here in front of us?
Absolutely. Two classic Northern Italian dishes. One, a braised chicken with some dried figs and sage. And what we've done is we've actually deglazed the pan with some grappa. And when that happens, you can just get the beautiful scents that come up with this. And it enhances those Mediterranean flavors of onions and carrots and olives. It's just fantastic. And you get a nice little grappa aftertaste to it.
It looks really good. And here it looks like we have a steak.
A beautiful steak with some gorgonzola cheese sauce. And blue cheese is a nice way with butter to finish steak. In this case, we've added a shot of grappa to bring up the flavors, and you get a really nice floral taste. And that goes very well with the meat.
Great, well I can't wait to try that. You can really smell the gorgonzola as well. If you'd like to try these recipes at home, all you have to do is log on to our website for the recipes. Over to you now, Stephen.
Thanks, Jennifer. Would you believe the tradition of cooking with grappa dates back in Italy almost 500 years? That's it for this edition of Spirit Basics. Join us next week when we take a closer look at bourbon and American whiskey. I'm Stephen Olson. For Jennifer Allan and our entire team here at Spirit Basics, we'll see you next week. Salute!
Special thanks to Willow Park Wine and Spirits, whose dedication to providing knowledge, awareness, and service to their customers has made this show possible.